There's a difference between feeling unwanted and knowing it. I didn't always know. I used to excuse it, the looks, the tone, the way my parents would lean a little closer when my sister spoke, as if her words carried gold and mine were air. I used to laugh it off, like a punchline I couldn't quite catch. But the moment it shifted from doubt to certainty, it wasn't about me. It was about my children. It was a small get-together, one of those casual Sunday dinners that had become tradition since we all started having kids. My sister, Kira, and I brought our families to our childhood home. It was nothing extravagant, just a home, cooked meal, catching up, kids running around. Something that was supposed to feel like love. But that day, something inside me cracked. My mom had made one of her signature dishes, chicken biryani, warm and rich with spices, the smell of our childhood. My kids, Max and Leela, ages 7 and 5, came running into the dining room, their eyes wide with anticipation. Max reached for a plate, grinning. "Is it ready, Grandma?" My mom barely glanced at him. "Not yet, sweetie. You can wait." Kira's kids, Arya and Ryan, were already seated. My dad placed full plates in front of them. Meat heaped high, saffron rice steaming. "There you go, champ," he said, ruffling Ryan's hair. I waited. I told myself they were just being practical. Maybe they were serving the younger kids first, even though mine were younger. I walked over to the kitchen to help, still trying to keep my smile stitched in place. "Do you want me to fix plates for Max and Leela?" I asked. My mother waved me off. "Let the others eat first. Your kids can have what's left." I blinked. "What's left?" She didn't even turn. "There should be enough." The words landed like ice water. I didn't make a scene, not then. Instead, I turned and saw my children still standing, waiting, their eyes now unsure. They had noticed, they had felt it, and there is nothing more quietly devastating than watching your children learn they are less, in the eyes of someone they call Grandma. I knelt beside Max. "Hey," I said softly. "We'll eat together later, okay? You want to help me make a plate?" He nodded, but his voice cracked. "Did we do something wrong, Mom?" And that was the moment. That was when the soft denial I'd wrapped around my memories began to shred. Because it hadn't started that day. No, it had always been there. I saw it now in glaring clarity, the years of being second to Kira. The better birthday gifts, the special treatment, the different rules. She got out of chores. She got praised for C's, while I got scolded for B+S. She was the golden one. I was the shadow following behind. And still, somehow, I had convinced myself that love would be equal in the next generation. But now I saw it. History was repeating. I thought of all the times I had come over, watched as my kids were given hand-me-down toys, while Kira's got new ones just because. How they never hung up my children's drawings on the fridge, but Arya's watercolor had a frame. I had laughed it off. I had told myself not to be petty, but this wasn't about me anymore. This was about two innocent kids being made to feel unworthy at their own grandparents' table. The meal went on. My sister laughed loudly, telling a story about Arya's school play. My parents hung on every word. I sat in silence, feeding my kids bits of dry rice scraped from the edge of the pot, pretending it was a picnic, pretending my heart wasn't cracking open. At one point, Kira looked at me and said, "Why so quiet? You're always so sensitive." I smiled tightly. Just tired, but the truth was, I was remembering every moment, every slight. Every birthday I spent crying in my room because Kira's friends had taken over the house. Every time I won something and was told not to show off because she wasn't doing well. Every time I was told to be the bigger person, the quieter one, the more understanding sister. I had been taught to swallow my feelings to keep the peace, but watching my kids do the same, no, that peace was a lie. When dinner ended, I stood up, quietly gathering Max and Leela's things. My mom asked, "You're leaving already?" I looked her in the eye, really looked. "Yeah, we've had enough." My dad furrowed his brow. "But dessert, keep it," I said, and my voice didn't shake. For once, I didn't feel like the little girl begging for their approval. I felt like a mother. I took my kids home. I made them pancakes at 9 p.m. and let them eat on the floor in front of cartoons. I held them a little longer when they hugged me goodnight. And when I lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling, one thing pulsed through my veins, louder than anger, sharper than grief. This was not going to happen again. Not to my children. The next morning, I didn't cry. I expected to. I thought the dam would break the second the kids were dropped off at school. The second I was alone in the kitchen, staring at their uneaten lunches because they'd been too full from our pancake dinner, but instead I stood by the sink, hands still, heart humming with something colder than grief, something harder. I wasn't just sad anymore. I was awake. I tried to talk to my mom a week later. I gave her the benefit of the doubt again. Maybe she hadn't realized. Maybe it had been thoughtlessness, not cruelty. We sat at her dining table, the same one where she had fed my niece and nephew while my children waited, stomachs growling. "Mom," I began carefully, "I need to talk to you about dinner the other night." She barely looked up from her tea. "Are you still upset about that?" I paused. Max and Leela were hurt. They asked why they had to wait. You told them to eat after Kira's kids, and there wasn't much left. Her expression didn't change. "They're older, they can wait. Why are you making this into such a thing? They're not older, they're younger." She frowned. "Don't exaggerate, and they weren't starving, were they? You're always so dramatic." And there it was, the gaslight, flickering again like it always had. I exhaled slowly, the disappointment no longer surprising. "You treat Kira's kids differently. You always have. That's ridiculous." She snapped, suddenly animated. "We love all our grandchildren equally." The lie was so smooth, so practiced, it almost sounded real. Almost, but then she added, "You're just being jealous. You've always had a problem with your sister doing better." There it was again. That old, familiar jab dressed as truth. I stared at her, wondering if she actually believed it, that I was the problem. That my children were somehow less deserving, because I was too sensitive, too jealous, too much. I didn't argue. Not because I had no words, but because I had finally run out of the energy to beg for something that should have been freely given. I stood up. "I think we'll take a break from Sunday dinners for a while." My mother blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, voice steady, "that I'm done asking you to treat my children like they matter." The silence after that was louder than any shouting match could have been. I didn't tell my kids everything. I just said we'd be doing our own thing on Sundays now. Max looked disappointed, but Leela cheered. "Can we make waffles and eat in pajamas?" "Yes," I smiled, "every Sunday." At first, it felt like cutting off a limb. That deep, ingrained instinct to keep family close, no matter the cost, was hard to ignore. But then came the peace. The soft, quiet mornings with music playing, the kids dancing barefoot in the kitchen, syrup on their cheeks, and no one telling them to wait, to shrink, to take less. I started noticing things I hadn't before, like how quickly my children bloomed when they were seen, when they didn't have to share space with favoritism. How Max started speaking up more, asking questions, laughing louder. How Leela stopped comparing herself to Arya, how she painted again. They were healing and so was I, but my family didn't like the distance. Texts came in, first from Kira. "Are you mad again? What is it this time?" Then from my dad, "We miss the kids. Come over this weekend." I ignored them. Not out of spite, but self-preservation. And then the phone call from my mother. Short, cold, clipped. "I hope you're not teaching your children to hold grudges." I wanted to laugh or scream, but instead I said, "I'm teaching them they deserve to be loved, fully," and I hung up. Still, the anger lingered, heavy beneath the surface. Not the loud, hot kind, the kind that simmers. That turns into resolve. I didn't want to punish them. I wanted to outgrow them, and so I started building something new. I created new traditions, Friday night board games, Sunday morning brunches, storytime under blanket forts. And eventually, I started hosting friends, neighbors, people who felt like family without sharing a drop of blood. And people came, they brought their kids, they brought laughter and casseroles and too much dessert. And they marveled at the joy in my home, the peace. One afternoon, a friend leaned in and said, "Your kids, they're so happy, so confident. It's rare, you know." And I smiled, because I knew exactly why. They were finally being raised in a house where they weren't eating from scraps of food, of love, of attention. That winter Kira called. She sounded tense, uncomfortable. Mom says you're ignoring everyone, that you're trying to make her feel guilty. I stayed quiet. She's upset, Kira added. She feels like you're punishing her. And then, the real question, what do you want from her? I laughed softly, sadly. I don't want anything from her. You're being petty. No, Kira, I said, I'm being free. Because revenge, I was learning, didn't have to look like cruelty. Sometimes it looked like healing in front of the people who tried to break you. Sometimes it looked like a full plate and making sure your children were served first. Not all at once, but slowly, the way wounds turn into scars, and then somehow into strength. The Sunday brunches I started with Max and Leela became a tradition. Our little trio grew, first a neighbor, then another single mom and her son, then a couple of families from school. It was never fancy. We sat on mismatched chairs, food served buffet style, laughter echoing through our home like sunlight. And at that table, my children were always served first. Not because they were more important than others, but because they mattered and they knew it. They didn't have to fight to be seen. They didn't have to wonder if they were enough. That was the difference. That was the gift I gave them. My parents didn't come around much after the rift, not at first, but time has a way of catching up with even the most stubborn hearts. My mom texted here and there, usually neutral things. Hope the kids are well. Saw Leela's photo on Facebook. She's grown. I'd reply politely, but never invite. Not yet. Then one day, after nearly 2 years of silence, I got a message from my dad. Would love to visit sometime, if that's okay. I stared at the screen for a long time. My hands were steady, but my heart wasn't. Was it time? I wasn't sure I had forgiven them. But I knew one thing for certain. I no longer needed them to acknowledge the past in order to protect the future. So I said yes. It was a quiet Saturday when they came, my parents, walking into the home they hadn't seen in over 2 years. Everything was familiar, yet not. The house looked warm, lived-in, not perfect, but full of life. Leela had painted a mural on the dining room wall, a giant tree with swirling branches, covered in the handprints of all the kids who had come through our home. My mom looked at it, then at me. You did this. I smiled. They did. I just gave them the wall. We didn't say much else. The next morning, they stayed for brunch. The usual crowd came, friends, kids, neighbors, love in every corner. Music played softly, coffee brewed, and laughter filled the kitchen. I moved around calmly, filling plates, setting out fruit, slicing bread. Max and Leela sat first. I handed them their plates, generous, full, warm. My mom watched from the kitchen doorway, silent. Next, I served the other children, one by one, each treated with the same care. Adults helped themselves last. No one asked why. It was just the way things were here. And then, I brought 2 small plates to my parents. There's more in the kitchen if you need it, I said. My mom looked down at her plate. For a moment, I saw her jaw tighten. But then her eyes softened. A long silence stretched between us. You always remembered the little things, she said. Even when we didn't. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Later that afternoon, as they got ready to leave, my dad lingered by the door. Max was reading on the couch. Leila was painting her nails a glittery blue. Peace lived in their bones. You've built something special here, he said quietly. I nodded. Yes, I have. He hesitated, then added, You were always the one we didn't worry about. Maybe that was the mistake. It wasn't an apology, not really, but it was the closest I'd ever get, and strangely, I didn't need more. Because this home, this peace, these children, this was the apology. This was the justice. People think revenge is about getting even, but the sweetest revenge is creating a life so whole, so loving, so radiant, that the people who try to diminish you are left speechless in its glow. It's building your own table, and making sure no child ever feels like a leftover. It's knowing your children will never have to ask, did we do something wrong? Because the answer will always be clear.